The System of Buddhist Practice by Venerable Rungruan Papa Saro, Dr. Rungruan Lim Chu Patipa. The Buddhist practice is a unique system of practice in accord to the Buddha's teachings as documented in various suttas, beginning with initializing a mindfulness first, then performing a mindfulness development with mindfulness meditation to empower the quality of mindfulness so that the mindfulness will be used in insight observations of the four mindfulness foundations, and then applying the Four Noble Truths to obtain the wisdom of the process of dependent origination, and finally utilize the mindfulness with the developed wisdom to eliminate all the defilements within the mind. This system of a pathway of progressive activities are due to cause and effect, that is, a result in a previous stage will induce a progression in the next consecutive stage, respectively. There is no any supernatural power involved in this Buddhist practice at all. The goal of Buddhist practice is to gain experiences specifically on the processes and states of the mind so that practitioner will realize of what exactly the Buddha teachings are. The Buddhist practice is a journey of mind development with detailed process on how to improve the states of the mind of an ordinary person to be a noble person. The Buddha encouraged everyone to perform this experimental Buddhist practice by having insight observations of an individual life, that is, by observing the arising mental phenomena within the mind, and investigating on the cause and effect of each particular phenomenon to understand the truths of life. The emphasis of Buddha's teachings is fundamentally based on the insight observation on how the mind is working, not just believing in words. In Buddhism, no one should be satisfied with only beliefs and faiths, because when dealing with the mind processing which works faster than thinking, only an experienced one with wisdom will be able to cope with the complexity of mind. The Buddhist practice can be defined in several terms depending on the context's applications, such as an insight observations when referring to the mental phenomena observations, an introspective learning when referring to the studying of the mind processing, and a cognitive process when referring to wisdom development within the central nervous system. What probably the most important goal in observing mental phenomena of the Buddhist practice is the complete understanding of the operating system of the mind, that is, the process of dependent origination of the mind. Therefore, we can realize of what is the cause of defilements and learning how to eliminate all of them in accord to the Buddha's teachings. In the late 19th century, William James, who was the founder of modern psychology, was interested in the Buddhist practice of which he called the introspective observation. He suggested that the introspective observation was what we had to rely on to study the mental phenomena in the mind. However, he was not patient enough to succeed in Buddhist practice, so later on he concluded that the introspective was difficult and fallible. Many Western scholars usually oversimplify the Buddhist practice and misunderstand that the Buddhist practice is just a meditation without a clear understanding of the role of mindfulness. In the system of Buddhist practice, we first learn about how to initialize the mindfulness, so that when performing a meditation, the meditation will be incorporated with mindfulness during the practice of mindfulness meditation. This technique of meditation will enhance the quality of mindfulness to reach a special kind of mindfulness called the purified mindfulness, and then we can perform the insight observations to gain the wisdom. The mindfulness ability to conduct an introspective observation on the mental phenomena is so important in Buddhism that it is called the primary entrance to be a noble person, because the insight capability opens an opportunity to have a deeper view of life and beginning to change a new perception of the world completely. And this is the reason why the Buddha explained that seeing the Buddha was the same as seeing the nature of mental phenomena in terms of process and state, because the one who saw the insights, then he could understand what the Buddha's teachings in meditation with mindfulness clearly. Traditionally, the meditation is an ancient practice of more than 4,000 years ago, and it was very popular even before the Buddha time. A generic term of meditation was referred to the mantra meditation. However, when the Buddha introduced the mindfulness for insight observation application, then a new mindfulness meditation was firstly introduced to the world. As a result, theoretically when mentioning about the meditation, there are two kinds of meditations, the mantra meditation of the conventional practice, and the mindfulness meditation, or Buddhist meditation or meditation with mindfulness, of the Buddhist practice. This learning approach requires a systematic development of the mind first, that is, to elevate the quality of mindfulness with higher capability, specifically a purified mindfulness first, which will be used in observing the mental phenomena and the mind processing correctly. And once the mind is equipped with purified mindfulness, then it is ready for performing an insight observation on the mental phenomena and the mind processing. The essence of Buddhist practices is related to the mindfulness development of various qualities throughout the practices. There was a description of the Buddhist practice by the Venerable Punna Pantanipputta on the Buddhist practice that it is a gradual improvement process which can be compared like traveling from a starting point to a destination by exchanging of 7 horse carriages, milestones, on the journey called the 7 steps of mind purification as follows. 1. Purification of morality. This part is like the study in morality, then having morality application in everyday life activities. 2. Purification of mind. This part is like the study in mind, having an early experience to purify the mind, especially having a practice in mindfulness meditation till the absorption. 3. Purification of understanding. This part is considered as the study in mind, when beginning to be success in practice, then becoming to realize the truths of life within nature. 4. Purification from any doubt. At this point of the experiences in practice, there is no doubt in the Buddha's teachings because the Buddha taught on the truths of life within nature. 5. Purification of knowledge and vision regarding path and not path. This part is the study in wisdom. As the Buddhist practice leads all the way to the wisdom development. 6. Purification of knowledge and vision of the way to make a progress. This part is also in the study in wisdom. And the mind will be in the way of progress in accord to the 37 factors for enlightenment as the way of progress. 7. Purification of knowledge and insight vision. This part is the success of the insight observation to gain insight wisdom, and then using this knowledge for the cessations of all defilements. The 7 steps of mind purification represent a step-by-step in mind development of the Buddhist practice, which are also aligned with the framework of threefold study strategy, that is, the purity of morality is the result of the accomplishment in the study on morality, and the purity of mind is the accomplishment of the study in mind. And the accomplishment of the study in wisdom can be broken down into several consecutive accomplishments of the purity of understanding after gaining insight wisdom. The purity from doubt is a direct result from having a knowledge of the truths of life within nature. The purity of knowledge and vision regarding path and not path is the accomplishment of the knowledge of what is the pathway to purify the mind. The purity of knowledge and vision of the way of process is the accomplishment of the knowledge to eliminate all kinds of defilement, and making a progress in mind development. The purity of knowledge and insight vision is the accomplishment of the knowledge of the insight wisdom. The system of Buddhist practice is collectively consolidated from the Buddha's teachings in various suttas which can be defined from the starting to the finishing goal in 6 steps as follows. 1. Preparations for the Buddhist practice, a study on how to perform the Buddhist practice correctly. Although this may sound something very simple, but unfortunately many practitioners mistakenly performing the Brahmin's practice for some kinds of supernatural powers instead of the Buddhist practice of studying the truths of life within nature. Therefore, some fundamental backgrounds of the Buddhist practice and preparations must be clarified at the starting of the Buddhist practice. 2. Mindfulness establishment and development. In the mind study, it is necessity to perform an insight observation to investigate on the mind, and the tool to be used in seeing the dharma of the mental phenomena is the mindfulness. Therefore it is very important to sharpen the quality of mindfulness to be sensitive enough to detect on what is happening in the mind at all times throughout the Buddhist practice. It is recommended that the mind should be well established with mindfulness before performing a meditation, otherwise the mind will rush into the one-pointedness state of mind too early, and sinking into an absorption without having mindfulness improvement. During the Buddha time, although many practitioners may experience the mantra meditation before, but when listening to the Buddha about having a mindfulness throughout the practice, they also were able to embed the mindfulness into the meditation, and later being able to perform an insight observation without difficulty. 3. The mindfulness meditation. This part of practice is composed of 3 components as follows. 3.1 The mindfulness meditation initialization. This may seem to be oversimplified because most people know how to perform a meditation, but typically those meditations are the type of mantra meditation, not the Buddhist meditation. Therefore, it is very necessary to learn how to initialize the mindfulness meditation correctly in accord to the Buddha's teachings on performing the Buddhist meditation with mindfulness carefully. The Buddhist meditation is a special technique learning how to use mindfulness with careful attention on something wholesome in order to abandon an arising unwholesome thought within the mind. 3.2 The mindfulness meditation for the application of the 5 hindrance abandonment. Once being able to perform the Buddhist meditation or the mindfulness meditation correctly, then applying this technique to abandon all the 5 hindrances which are considered as the lower fetters before penetrating into the inner mind, and tracing into the initial thoughts of problems. 3.3 The mindfulness absorption. This is sometimes called a deep mindfulness meditation. After being able to cleanse all the 5 hindrances, now penetrating into the inner mind of initial thoughts, we can realize that all kinds of unwholesome thoughts are originated at the initial thoughts. Therefore, if we can abandon the initial thought by liberated thinking, then the mind will be clear from any kinds of troubling thoughts. The Buddha called the success a master of the courses of thought. This part is also very important because after then, we will set the mindfulness to be neutral to any kinds of received mental object, then the mindfulness will be developed to be a purified mindfulness with no bias or preference, or distortion on the arising mental phenomena. And this a kind of mindfulness to be used in performing an insight observation. For an insight observation on the 4 mindfulness foundations, the Buddha called this part of the Buddhist practice, the main pathway to the enlightenment. The observation technique is a scientific approach to study on the truths of life within nature in the Buddhism. In Buddhism, no matter how much faith we may have in the Buddha, but it is the real experiencing of the truths in nature that can improve the quality of an individual. The Buddha, or the God, or any great spirit, none of them can make any success without performing the Buddhist practice. 5. The wisdom development. This is the third part of the threefold study strategy on the wisdom study. The Buddhism has no interest in any kinds of supernatural powers because all of them are useless in resolving problems inside the mind. It is the wisdom of knowing the truths of life within nature that can guide the mind into the right processing. The subject of wisdom development is very abstract and it is probably the most difficult part to be explained. It is something like a cognitive process of the mind, as the had explained that the mind was capable in acknowledging what was happening, and then developing wisdom to abandon the arising problem within the mind, and finally liberating the mind. During performing an insight observation on arising mental phenomenon, the Buddha suggested to perform research on Dharma by having 7 aspects of investigations on the arising phenomena and the 3 aspects of insight investigations on the whole mind processing with the 4 Noble Truths analysis. The application of wisdom for the cessations of all the taints, and to eliminate all suffering in life, after contemplating on the process of dependent origination, and gaining wisdom by performing the 4 Noble Truths on the process of dependent origination. Then we will apply this wisdom for the cessations of arising defilements at craving, clinging, and ignorance of the process of dependent origination. So that the mind will be liberated, and the cessation of all suffering in life will be completely eliminated.